So what I value most, though, during that period of my life is connecting strength to capability. Through my 20s and in the Marine Corps, my size was always a disadvantage. My size was always a weakness. Through powerlifting, strongman, and even to some extent CrossFit, my body was no longer my worst enemy. My body was now my strongest ally.
So I did not grow up as an athlete. I played a couple seasons of team soccer and baseball till about middle school. I was heavily involved in martial arts for probably 4 or 5 years. But I didn't see that as physical activity. I saw that as a cultural activity, self-defense activity, and something fun. But I never really connected if I do running or pull-ups or push-ups or sit-ups or any kind of extracurricular training, it would improve my martial arts. Snowboarding was probably the closest I came to enjoying sports the way that I do as an adult. Golf was always too competitive for me. I never liked that aspect of sports where the score is all that matters. Snowboarding, though, was super individual for me. I never cared about tricks. Again, not connecting my physical ability to the actual sport of snowboarding. I just love powder, getting off the groomed trails, going into the woods, exploring untouched parts of the mountains of Northern California, disappearing for hours. And now that I'm doing trail running, I really see a parallel between trail running and the sport that I enjoyed most as a kid. That was the extent of my athletic pursuits as a kid. My last year in the Marine Corps, a couple key things happened that led to me having to take charge of my own physical fitness. I'd always pushed the boundaries on my weight up until then. And I'd be on what's called BCP, Fat Body Platoon, body conditioning program, off and on. But at 6 months out, we had a new staff sergeant take over who took the BCP seriously. And they started separating guys from the Marines who had 2 or 3 months left on their contract. So here I am, 6 months out, facing the risk of getting separated for being like 3 pounds over. So I wasn't about to let that happen. So I did some drastic measures. Started taking hydroxycut. Restricted my diet to like sliced turkey, lettuce, Jello, and rice. And I started to run twice a day, 6 miles each. Did that for about 2 to 3 weeks before my next weigh-in. Was below the standard, ran my fastest ever PFT. I think my 3-mile run was like 20:30. Got off the program, and because my PFT score was finally high enough, ended up picking up corporal the next first of the month. And then I got out 5 months later into a desk job, complete civilian puke, and gained 30 pounds in my first year out. But that was one of the first times in my life I knew that if I could find the fire within, I could do what needed to be done. So when I got out of the Marine Corps, all I knew was running. If you want to get healthy, start running again. Work on beating your 3-mile run time. My eating at that time was just as sporadic as my training. So I would do things like give up fast food for a month, give up soda for a month, drink a lot of water for a month. But these were all tactics to watch the scale move. And if the scale didn't move, I'd get frustrated and stop that plan. I didn't connect the training to the eating to make progress at this time in my 20s. They were just two separate tactics that would work in the short term, but weren't set up for long-term success with progression and realistic goals.
So about 3 months before my 30th birthday, I joined a CrossFit box. I knew about CrossFit ever since the Marine Corps because I had a gunnery sergeant who had gotten into it in 2006. And then finally into my 30s, I was ready to commit the time and the money to changing my life. And I always had CrossFit as this like last ditch effort, nuclear option that was going to fix me. And so I started October 2013, started in a CrossFit box and fell in love with it and loved everything about this different approach to strength, this different approach to fitness. The guys that I saw in the Marine Corps who were lifting, they were doing it to get big, huge necks, biceps, abs, girls, all the things that come with an aesthetic approach to bodybuilding. And I knew that muscle weighs more than fat, and I was already having enough trouble with my weight, and so I was not interested in getting heavier in order to look better. CrossFit changed all that, and I started to see that functional fitness is a goal in itself, and it's not aesthetics is a byproduct of that. So you can be in the gym in order just to lift heavy for the sake of lifting heavy. I did that for about a year, dropped 30 pounds in that first year, and was starting to reach my capacity on what I could do aerobically. About a year later, 2016, was exclusively doing powerlifting and had stopped doing CrossFit at that box. Got introduced to Strongman around that time through one of the coaches, one of the buddies there at the gym. Ended up leaving that gym in January 2017. With 2 buddies, we started doing Strongman Saturdays, and I just absolutely fell in love with the type of stuff we were lifting. Strongman for me had 2 things that really attracted me to it. The first one was the novelty aspect. So doing powerlifting, you go back and forth between deadlift, squat, and bench. Strongman always had something different for me to do. So if I was getting tired of walks or carries, I could start doing overhead presses. If I was getting tired of that, I could start deadlifting variations. There was nail bending, eventually into Highland games, natural stones, just always something new to try out, new to learn. watching a bunch of YouTube videos, watching old footage, reading as many books that I could to find out how to lift something. The other aspect that I really loved about Strongman, and what ended up being the hard part for me, was there was this group aspect of it. So I was always training with somebody else. One of my best friends would work early in the morning and he'd be home by 3. I was working from home at the time. So we'd go to the gym at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and we would be there for 2 hours getting our training in. Then I was also training Strongman Saturday groups. I was training a Wednesday or a Thursday night group at the gym, people who were interested in learning about Strongman. So there was this holdover from my days in the Marine Corps of suffer together. And what I know about myself is I can put up with anything if I know that somebody else is putting up with it. If somebody else is suffering next to me, I'm going to be at least able to suffer as long as they can. If they're hurting, I'm hurting, we can get through this together. The group aspect of Strongman that I really liked started to impede my progress and impede my focus when I was no longer working in those groups. So what I value most, though, during that period of my life is connecting strength to capability. Through my 20s and in the Marine Corps, my size was always a disadvantage. My size was always a weakness. Even when I was fat in the Marine Corps at 205 pounds, I was always being told, you're not tall enough to be this big, you're not strong enough to be this big, and you really need to be 170 pounds. Through powerlifting, strongman, and even to some extent CrossFit in my 30s, my size was an advantage. My strength was an advantage. My body was no longer my worst enemy. My body was now my strongest ally. And so now, as I bring that into my 40s through endurance training and trail running, I will always remember that my body is more capable than I ever gave it credit for.
At the end of June, I weighed in at 317 pounds. 2 years of sporadic training. At that point, I hadn't even been in a gym for 10 months, garage or otherwise. July 28th, posted a picture of me graduating from boot camp, which I'd shipped off for 20 years earlier. The next morning, I go to Chick-fil-A with my father-in-law and order water with my chicken biscuit. And he knows exactly what happened. He said, "You saw that picture of you from 20 years ago. And so now you're ordering water." And I said, "Yeah, it's true. I'm also considering doing a sprint triathlon." So 2 days later, Monday, I swam for the first time for the triathlon training. I picked a sprint triathlon for that time because it was just enough outside of my comfort zone to be scary. Like, if I don't train for this for the next 7 weeks, I'm gonna hurt myself. But then not so far outside my comfort zone that it was unattainable. Swim, I was way more confident than I should have been. Bike seemed like a non-issue for me. And I knew that the 3-mile run, I'd get through it, but it would be my weakest event. So I needed to train. And so that's what I did. I kept telling myself during the race, as I kept getting passed by all these people, run your own race. Don't worry about them. Why would I think that my first triathlon, after 2 months of training and being sedentary for 2 years before that, effectively, would deserve anything higher than last place? That race was a capstone, a congratulations to myself for 2 months of solid training and busting my butt. But what mattered more was to get back out there on Tuesday or Wednesday or whatever day and start again. I can't make myself become Kenyan any more than I can make myself become Icelandic. This is the body that God gave me. This is the body that I've lived in for the past 39 years. This is who I am, and I'm gonna make the best of what I have. And what I've learned through strength training first, and now in endurance training, is I've got it pretty good. My body is not my biggest weakness, like starting off in the Marine Corps taught me to think. My body is my biggest advantage if I learn what it needs to respond. My mentality to push through is my biggest advantage. So I'm starting to appreciate myself, give myself more grace, not be so harsh, and focus on long-term patterns rather than short-term placing or comparison to other people who don't have this body, don't have this body's advantages and disadvantages. So it's that idea, again, I'm telling myself, no matter what I'm doing, run your own race.